You're listening to the I Love You Keep Going podcast with George Haas. For more information, please visit our website at www.mettagroup.org. That's www.mettagroup.org.
If you're interested in diving into your own attachment repair journey and earning security, I invite you to sign up for my free video training called What is Secure Attachment and Do I Have It? You'll learn what attachment theory entails, the defining traits of different attachment strategies, and how to see the warning signs of attachment disturbance across different areas of your life and behavior. Not only that, but you'll glimpse the impact this attachment injury may be having on your relationships, career, and meaningful pursuits. This framework is a helpful starting place, giving you the keys to understanding the root problem and an introduction to the reparative path forward that we offer here at Mettagroup. Head to mettagroup.org/start-here or click the link below to get started. So welcome, everybody. This is I Love You Keep Going. It's Thursday, February 12th, 2026 at 7:36 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I thought that I would talk about, let me see if I can pull up my list here, the attached society, how collective insecurity fuels polarization. So the attached society, how collective insecurity fuels polarization. Have you noticed that we're quite polarized these days? What I think is interesting is, and this is one of my favorite topics, is to understand the nature of how the demands of the economy on each of us to make our way in the world shapes the way that we respond. And this really goes all the way back to the early attachment frame. What we're really looking for as children is to find a way that we can engage with our caregivers so that they'll be responsive to us and to what we need from them in order to feel a sense of security in the world, and then to be interesting and valuable, a sense of being delightful to somebody else, and then also to have them really see and understand what we're capable of and what we're interested in, and then encourage us to pursue those interests so that we find life to be lively and meaningful. And in that process, what we understand in the relationship with them is what we have to do to elicit from them the kind of responses that we want. And so we develop this list or this hierarchy of strategies that we use to elicit responses from other people. And then, of course, we just carry those out as we become adults into the world of gathering the things that we need. Now, if you're secure, of course, and you have sensitively attuned caregivers who have the resources to take care of you, who are interested actually in you and don't require of you that you reflect back to them the thing that they need. So in that constellation where you actually have to respond to the caregiver in a way that meets their needs, it's a kind of reversal of that dynamic of creating security in childhood. Are you raising your hand, PJ? No? Okay. Of course, in insecure and disorganized attachment, what's happening is, in some sense, the child is organizing around meeting the needs of the caregiver so that the caregiver will be responsive to them, rather than being met by the caregiver and supported and encouraged to develop what the child needs. So you might say, right at the beginning of life, we learn the essential roles of the economies, the primary exploration, which is really about the pursuit of meaning and finding a life that matters to us, and the secondary exploration, which is the thing that gathers the time, energy, and resources that we need to survive in the world. And, children are really oriented toward surviving. That we've all gotten as far as an astonishing thing, considering how difficult it is to get here. Um, and we learn and develop that hierarchy of strategies in childhood. And then we meet the world and provide for it the things that it requires us in exchange for the support that we need. Now, what may be unsurprising is that when you enter into the workforce, the system of the economy that you enter into requires things from you, and that list of skills that you learned in childhood, that hierarchy of strategies that you use to connect, are rewarded or not rewarded, particularly in the economy, depending on how you enter into it. And so, what you'll find, for instance, in understanding the rise of these large multinational corporations and the going into the office and what we might call the ALO, or the external management or control of your exchange of labor for the resources that you receive. Is that all making sense in terms of how that rolls? That certain qualities of engagement are rewarded and certain qualities of engagement are not rewarded. And so what you'll notice is, particularly since the end of the Second World War and that whole big economic boom, is narcissistic qualities or dismissing avoidant qualities, if we were to characterize that as attachment in the attachment frame, are rewarded. And so if you're native to those kinds of strategies, it's easier to move up into the ranks of the corporate culture than if you don't have those qualities, and then you have to adapt and develop them, or you don't succeed as well in that system. But then what's happened in sort of the the birth of this was, of course, in the 1980s and into the 1990s, is the arise of tech and those kinds of environments, which is a whole different culture than that piece about going into the office and doing your 8 hours and then coming home, and that clear separation between work life and not work life that was enforced by the structure of it doesn't really exist anymore, and it sort of moved into this you might say from the aloe or the other management to self-management, right? Where we're responsible for it. And those long trajectories of a job don't really exist anymore. And it's become more focused on projects. You get assigned to a project and you work on the project. And you don't really have the sort of milestones that earlier life provided for us, the achievements and the positions that we're lauded and celebrated. We don't really have that so much. We're working on these projects that fit into these giant systems, and there's no remarkable achievement or celebration of each of these small pieces that fit into this ever evolving engagement. Is that making sense? Would
Sorry, George, is too abstract for me. Could you give an example?
Well, let's say that you're a coder and you work in a tech company and you're assigned to a project to create code for a certain section of the overall product that is a kind of commerce product, let's say. And then you finish. You're part of a team, and the team produces the content that or the coding that you need. And then once that section of code is completed, the team is dissolved, and then you have to find another project within the company. There isn't even guaranteed employment in the same company from project to project, depending on how successful each of the products are. And you don't have to go in the office. You're working remote, and so you're communicating with the team remotely, so that there isn't even that physical camaraderie of a team that might be there. And so there's no real sense of the separation between when you're at work and when you're not at work. And because there's no security in your position, and it creates this intense competition between even team members. Not even pulling together as a team to complete a project. You're competing with the team for the next project while you're on the project that you're in. Creates a whole different kind of experience where the separation between when you're at work and doing work things and when you're not at work, not doing work things. And in the way that the earlier culture of employment worked, we had our own time, which we could then use toward primary exploration. And now in this secondary culture, what the big hit is in this competitive project to project, what is almost a kind of temporary employment is really the annihilation of primary exploration and the terrible depression that often comes from that kind of experience. So there's that initial burst of the new project and the new interest and the potential of meeting people and forming relationships. But over time, I think that the absence of the organization of life around primary exploration leads to a kind of hollowing out, even though the rewards of financially can be uh, in excess of what you might get, certainly from that other kind of employment. And, even with the nomadic digital work, you can drop yourself into a culture where that economic reward is a real big jump over what the local population can do, which gives you a kind of sense of agency, but it doesn't actually embed you anywhere in those relationships. If you talk about, is that making sense so far? When you talk about uh, secure attachment and the organization of life around primary exploration, what you're building around you are people that support you in your primary exploration. But in order for them to do that, they have to understand what it is and they have to be able to relate to it. And that relationship to their own primary exploration is the thing that creates these synergies in relationships. Your primary exploration is relatable enough to theirs that your experience of exploring is something that they can translate into their exploration. And their exploration is close enough or related enough to yours that the experience of their exploration is something that you can then use to further your exploration. Those are the kinds of relationships that really soar and really have a tremendous impact and meaning on your life. When you get to be my age and you can reflect back on who it was that was pivotal in an essential direction that you went. There are these shining people that were there that provided some kind of impetus or information that allowed you to just shift into these directions that ended up being the thing that fulfills a life. And when you don't have that, you don't have the network around you that people are paying attention to whether you're doing your exploration or not doing it, and it doesn't relate. And actually, that the people that are closest to you on the team are actually your competitors, which is one of the problems of the we would like to categorize it as the uh, uh, straight cisgendered male problem of our society, but women seem to jump right into that whole thing, so it just becomes that that dominant culture of materialism and the gathering of stuff. Now, I probably would not have too much objection to the gathering of stuff if it wasn't killing the planet for all of us, right? Even though we don't all get to collect all of the stuff that the people at the very top get to collect, if they could just collect it and take it maybe to Mars. If it didn't kill the habitability for the rest of us, maybe that would be something to consider. But since it is killing the habitability for the rest of us, um, I think there should be some reflection about that. And not underestimating, obviously, my vast privilege in comparison to most people. Is that making sense? So I think that the polarity of society is really directly related to the inequality that happens. And one of the things about that piece is, particularly when so much of the resources are swept up into one small group of the population, is it sets up this cascade of events, which is part of the and one of the hardest pieces of this human condition, which is that if the early pieces of development don't happen, the rest of life is stacked up on that. And so the cascading problems that come from the deprivation early in life just snowball over the course of the life. And then it can produce in you such an anger that this has happened. And that anger can be so distorting in terms of perception of what's happened, and that can easily be funneled into the directions that we're headed at this point. That anger and that need for a sense of compensation, is even, I might say, a sense of revenge for what's happened. Mudit?
I just want to say on the other side of this is also the people who are free and have the resources. And I meet a lot of nomads a lot, but they're still equally miserable because they don't know how to explore.
Right. Well,
Um,
yeah.
so it's kind of tricky just to blame this on the organization. I do feel organizations do give people freedom as well. I'm sure not all of them, but people are by like volunteering to work more because they don't know what else to do. I meet a lot of people like that.
Well, what are the choices? A reasonable person will look at the potential for advancement in culture, will be conditioned to look at what advancement is in a life. What is the life that you're supposed to have? This comes from not only the family position, but the relentless marketing of what a life is supposed to be. Now, what you'll notice is that these ideas, these concepts of what a valuable life might be, are also presented by the companies that gain from the uptake of these ideas of what a life might be. There isn't really any more a independent press. There isn't anymore a, we used to call it product placement, where every now and then you'd be watch a movie and then a Coke can would appear, or whatever it is, right? Whatever the product was. Now it seems like the whole movie is product placement. Uh, that everything is designed to present this idea of what it is that we're supposed to have in order to feel fulfilled, but it is a constant tread, um, treadmill of the gathering of tokens, none of which turn out to be particularly fulfilling, or at least, so I think of myself uh, caught up in that. One of the, say, advantages of being a gay man of my generation is that it was very clear that if you came out, you would be a second-class citizen, and all avenues in that primary venue of success would be closed to you, and that was the choice that you would make. It's I think it's different enough now that you might say that that isn't what it is, but when in the 70s, when you had that, when I made the choice to do that, it meant I needed to get a new family, new friends, that the career potential would be lousy, I would be poor. All of those things were what that choice meant. And then what you have to do is touch into the core of the life that you want. Are you going to be content to live a life that has an outwardly facing profile that's acceptable, and a hidden life, which is what most people chose to do? And I would say they still choose that primarily. Would it?
It's interesting. The exploration still requires it. It's almost like I have a belief that the secondary resources are still, or the life that I want to live requires this independence and not to think of secondary resources at all.
Right,
And it's almost like I have to focus on secondary right now a lot so that later in life I don't have to think about it.
right,
That's the everybody's mindset these days. Everybody.
right.
Um, so that's very, very interesting that I've
So
noticed.
that you abandon
Current
uh,
state, yeah.
for the time being, in sarcastic air quotes,
For the future.
for the time when what? You've gathered enough resources that you can then uh, fuck off and have a life. Is that the
Yeah.
idea?
Mhm.
uh, yes, it's so intoxicating, that idea, isn't it?
It
And
is.
really, what you're getting out of it is that you don't have to risk the exploration now.
Yeah.
That's the main advantage of it, I think. Um, Whereas to organize a life in such a way that your primary activity of life is the exploration, of course, all of the rest of the stuff falls into place when you do that, because it's so fulfilling. And the need for distraction and the need for soothing tokens, that the other life produces, actually does, in some sense, consume that the resources that you're gathering.
Actually, it's coming to your first point. I just realized as you were saying that the security of the job, the insecurity of the job is pretty high.
Yeah,
So it's always like, you're right, that tends to put you in the state of just unsafe. That you don't know what's going to happen, so you're just anxious, and that it just takes a lot of energy from
And
primary.
it also shuts down the exploration system. So
Yeah,
it's not available.
yeah, so true. Thank you.
Rachel.
Hi, George. Hi,
Hi.
everybody. Um, yeah. Oh, I've had a question around this, listening to your other podcast this morning around predictability and reliability.
Hmm.
And what I'm noticing is that in the last 5 to 10 years, well, throughout my life, I've really enjoyed primary exploration. And yet there's something that where my perception will shift and I'll get so like going hiking in nature is my main way.
Mm.
And I get so much out of it, but then I come back to the real world supposedly. And then that didn't bring any resources. And
Right.
it's such a grand shift. So I
Mm.
think my question is like, here I was like I've built a business, like I'm self-employed, so I have this freedom, but it's not bringing in the kind of resources that I need. Then the foundation of life kind of fell out. Multiple family members died. I was caring for them. And so it's just like this scattered experience of consistent unpredictability. Uh,
Mm.
and then now it's like, oh, I need to move again. I've moved 30 times in 30 years. So I noticed my nervous system being like, I could
Yeah.
feel my infant self like trying to manage this current situation that I've done over and over and over again. And I just don't know how the primary exploration is like feeding the world of like basic resources where I'm not like making ends meet. So that's just always kind of back here looming.
Mm.
So until I heal my attachment style, what are a few things you recommend someone doing in this in-between state, if there is anything specific, to kind of reorient oneself around, yeah, resources and becoming emotionally dysregulated.
The resource question is uh, um, we could talk about it in a lot of different ways. Part of it is, of course, what what is the group that you fall into within society, and how are those resources flowed into the group that you are in? Women, of course, are paid at uh, three-quarters of what men are paid with as a group, so that it's a different question, you know. Um, and then the uh, scarcity of resources is often linked to limitations that you're imposing on yourself in terms of what your exploration can be. Um, and then uh, it also has to do with exploration, and we could talk about it in terms of fear of success. Uh, if we were to make a distinction between fear of success and fear of failure, people are relentlessly, doggedly pursuing the goal, and they don't let anything get in the way because they can't fail. Fear of success, people, the closer they get to the goal, the more anxiety getting the goal produces. And so somewhere along the way, they throw up problems that then uh, um, change the possibility or prevent the reaching of the goal. And so you notice a pattern of fear of failure, people relentlessly pursuing and getting goals. That's how that's characterized. And what you notice in fear of success people is they have a lot of beginnings, they have some middles, but they don't finish so often because the way to relieve the anxiety of succeeding is by failing. failing doesn't feel good, and that restriction of resources doesn't feel good, but it's actually less painful than succeeding is. And so, in order to regulate anxiety, you restrict the resources that are available. So, looking at that, where that fear of success comes from is that early experience of attachment where you are restricted, or the development of your exploration is interfered with by the caregiver because you're exploring and you're separating yourself from them to explore creates difficulties for them in managing the separation. And so what they do is they prevent you from separating. But when that it's either in the form of overprotection, or they become chaotic and disorganized themselves. And when you come back into the home environment and it's completely chaotic since you left, you find yourself less and less able to leave so that you can manage the environment. And so that very commonly manifests itself as under earning. So part of that is to reorganize around that, and clarity is really important on that. Do you have a good sense of your money management? And by that I mean, do you manage your money on a daily basis so you're really clear about what it is? Do you know how much you have, how much you need to earn? Do you have sources for earning? Do you make sure that you are reaching those financial goals, which is a way of organizing the distribution between primary and secondary exploration? Is that all making sense? If you go into primary exploration and you have the anxiety of financial insecurity, it's going to limit the capacity for primary exploration, which might be enough to limit the anxiety that would come from that succeeding in those goals. So part of this is a real clarity around what the situation actually is in its unfolding. If you work for yourself, that often puts you in a position where you end up working too much and limiting exploration in that way. But the breaks in of only primary exploration without attending to the secondary exploration then becomes a balance question, right? How do you keep in balance the primary and the secondary exploration and organize it really around each day rather than in blocks, so that each day you attend to the gathering of the resources and each day you attend to uh, engaging in the primary exploration? Is that making sense? Um, and there's even 12-step support for debting. Debting is one thing. Under earning is another. Lack of clarity is one thing. Um, is that helping?
What did you say? Deading?
Debting.
What does that mean?
That you overspend and end up in debt. All of these things are dopaminergic, right? So that the primary underpinning of this is the dopamine surges that you get from it. But debting is one of those things. You get a dopamine surge, say, from purchasing something, even though you can't pay for it. So all sorts of credit cards and whatnot. The sources of that you can engage in.
And then you said lack of clarity.
Usually there's some lack of clarity or magical thinking in terms of where the funds are going to actually pay for it, or you can uh, you buy stuff and the idea is, oh, well, the payment's only $50 a month. I can manage the $50 a month. Um, but then all of a sudden you can't, right? Uh, uh, and in our culture, because of the exchange of information, it's at this point it restricts everything. You can't even rent an apartment if you get yourself into a pickle financially. In my day, you could write a check on Friday and put the money in the bank on Tuesday. And you could cash checks all over town. It was they called it kiting, like kite, the things that float up in the air. Anyway, can't do that so much now. Mm. So under earning is a restriction. It restricts your exploration, and you can justify to yourself not exploring because you don't have the resources to do it. Uh, Overspending is always accompanied by some magical thinking that you'll find the money miraculously somewhere and be able to pay it off. And each time you manage to do it, you get the dopamine blast. So we're looking at that aspect of it. It's a form of process addiction, right? Process addiction is an avoidant strategy mostly. There are certain, it's really in process addictions is tied to rejection, anticipation. One of the things that happens in childhood is, and this is for preoccupied people, which are preoccupied people have a tendency to be more organized around process addictions than substance addiction. The involving aspect of attachment orientation, how in preoccupied attachment, the main cause of preoccupied attachment is the caregiver involving the child in the maintenance of the caregiver's mind states, right? You have to manage the emotional and mental processes of your caregiver in order to feel a sense of safety and in order to get your needs met. And in that exchange, a lot of times you're engaged in managing the caregiver, and the caregiver then is able to be responsive to you and what your needs are erratically, but they actually can do it some of the time. In people who end up with addiction who have a primary preoccupied exploration orientation, what actually happens is that you are involved in managing the mind states of the caregiver, and they reject your attachment needs. So you're totally involved in taking care of them, but they reject any attempt that you have for them to manage your attachment needs. And so you turn toward these process addictions to manage the rejection, whereas people who are on the avoidant side of the things, they tend to turn more to substances for it than to process addictions. One of the things I want to just emphasize at this moment is the one of the great sadnesses that we need to attend to in becoming free of this early attachment conditioning is the uh, unconscious uh, or the need to keep the cost of that from ourselves. So this we don't allow ourselves really to understand the expense to us that these early attachment problems have caused. did your caregivers really see you and understand what mattered to you and understood what was good at you? So they provided at each of those moments of development the resources that you needed. Did they have the resources even to do it so that you could flourish in the development of your capacity to do those things? And if they didn't, whether they couldn't or they didn't recognize that that was the thing to do, or they thought that it wasn't important and you should do something else, that aspect is then not developed. And when you reach the next stage where you would have then taken from that position of that capacity being developed into the next uh, development, it's not there. And then the next development isn't there, and then the next one isn't there, and then you don't we don't really come into the full cognitive capacity to recognize these things until we're in our mid 20s. This is the obligation of our caregivers to us to help us develop these capacities when we don't have the social position or capacity to develop them for ourselves. And then when we reach our mid 20s and we can reflect back and see what our potentials were and what has been developed, and we even if we're astonishingly quick in turning toward these things and beginning the process of developing them, we're still 2 decades behind uh, people who had that. When you begin to really recognize the huge advantage of secure attachment and that tender development in comparison to insecure and disorganized attachment, it is a terrible sadness, which I think you hear me talk about. And if we can come into the terrible sadness and allow it and begin to really pursue the things that matter to us, we can form a life that's very rich in meaning, even if it isn't what it would have been, even if it's behind. And I think that what happens often is that it's so painful to look at that and so painful to come to terms with our caregivers' choices for us that instead of turning into the primary exploration, we abandon it because we can't get ourselves to begin. In some sense, it's such a disadvantage in comparison to other people. And I think that we really should reconsider that and begin as soon as we can recognize it, because we'll still derive the meaning from it that we need, no matter what stage of development we're uh, in in doing it. And then that's where that gathering of people around you that see the value of it and support it and encourage it is so important, so that we're not, in some sense, comparing to these fantastic ideas of what might have been. Is that making sense? Would it?
So is there a correlation between this and IQ test, the
Um,
lagging behind thing?
well, let's say you have a really astonishing IQ, and let's say uh, you're in order for you to fully develop that astonishing IQ, you would have to go into a school system that was capable of teaching somebody like you, but that your caregiver didn't want to accommodate that for you. So instead, you went to the ordinary school where there was no one there to address uh, that capacity that you had. Uh, and so that capacity did not develop in the way that it might have.
So you will perform low on IQ test.
No, you'll perform the same on the IQ test, but you won't have the resources to develop the capacities that you might have had had you been in a system that promoted that. So that when you come of age and you're let's say competing to get into a top school, you won't be able to get in, even though you have an IQ that might have allowed you to get in. That makes sense
You mean
because
other
you
capabilities, other like social capability, like other, by
and
that I
all
mean
of the intelligences are like that.
all of the intelligence. Okay.
You know, you have an astonishing musical gift, but you are not afforded the support to develop them. So by the time you're old enough to do it on your own, you're so far behind that you're not going to ever reach the level of competency that the people who had the support reach. How do you relate to that? What does that mean to you in your life? If you look at the polarization of society, this is really what we're talking about in a way. If you look at how the economic system, and this is largely through taxation that this has happened, this going back to Reagan when he reorganized taxation. When I was a kid, my dad made enough money that he was in the 94% tax rate at the top. 94%. There wasn't this uh, I like, they called it the trickle down theory of economics. I like to call it the vacuum up theory of economics because they just pulled all the money out and they did it smart. They started with the bottom 50% and they just stripped all of the assets out there. And then they refocused on the 50 to top 10% and they just stripped all of the assets out of there. And the top 10 they let stay at the same rate, and all of the money flowed up into the top 1% or the top 100ths of a percent. And so the upper middle class that could have put the brakes on this largely coasted, and their lifestyle stayed the same. And this was all engineered into the tax code. And now the people who have had all of those assets stripped and their children's education has been, you know, dwarfed and truncated are so angry that this has happened. And the Democratic Party, which reorganized around protecting the upper middle class and abandoning these people whose assets were stripped, are looking at them like, are you insane that we would support you after what you've done to us? And we have done it to them. There's no question about that. And then they're looking for the destruction of the system and they're looking for revenge for what's been done to them. And it has been done to them. Uh, the, you know, uh, and how do you turn that around? How do you recreate an education system that's been systematically and intentionally destroyed so that they're at a disadvantage? Um, the exportation of manufacturing jobs, the that the no longer willing to share any of this economic advantage with working people, just stripping it all away from them and then going into countries that are not so developed and taking the surplus value of that labor after abandoning the people here. No wonder it's not even surprising that they would be so angry. The traditional role of the male provider and the female homemaker doesn't work anymore because there's no space in the economy for a single income. When I was growing up, a blue collar job was equivalent to a house and car, and the homemaker. That was what the deal was, and it doesn't exist anywhere now. And this has not been accidental in our culture. Now, if we look at it in the attachment lens, of course, secure people beget secure people because they have the resources to take care of kids and they have the insight to promote kids, and everybody else is insecure because of the insecurity of resources. And at the lower end, poverty is, highly correlated to disorganized attachment, and people who are disorganized don't function well. It's hard for them to make any of this stuff happen for their lives. And when you look at that picture, it's that terrible sadness, right? That's there. It's the core of it. Why preserve a system that won't help me? Why not go for a different system? It's not an unfair question considering our conduct. So anyway, maybe we should do some loving kindness.
You do loving kindness. We'll do something else.
I'm doing compassion practice. This is an expression of compassion. So, what do you say? Loving kindness? So go ahead and settle into the body, closing the eyes, scanning through the body, looking for any tension you might be holding. Okay, let go of the meditation. How's that? So Saturday, we're starting the meditation and addiction level 1, which will run for 3 Saturdays from 9 to 1. On Tuesday, the 17th, at 1 p.m., is our lunch meeting. Once a month, we have a meeting. Let's see. The topic for that meeting is not losing yourself in loving relationships, which is about well, you might say it's about the dynamic of dismissing and preoccupied relationships, and how you can change those so that they're more secure in their functionality. We're going to begin a new level 2 class on Friday the 20th at 10:30. So that's 10:30 to 12:30. And then we have a Kaleidoscope on the 27th, which is our monthly gathering of the Sangha. So that's what's coming up. Christian?
George, can I just get a moment after this?
Sure. Everybody okay? I offer the teaching freely, but I do hope if you're able to make a donation, you will by going to the website and clicking on the donation link. Any amount is appreciated. It helps support me and also the work Mettagroup is doing. As long as you're there, take a look at what's coming up. Most of it's up on there. Really appreciate your practice. It's wonderful to see you, and I hope to see you soon. If you're struggling with addiction or have in the past, I invite you to check out my free video on how to heal from addiction. You'll learn about the distinct attachment repair approach to addiction recovery that we offer here at Mettagroup, and how this approach differs from other forms of addiction support like 12-step programs, rehab, or even therapy. If you're finding that persistent anger, frustration, resentment, and shame consume your life, or you're stuck in dysfunctional cycles that keep your life small, then check out this resource. If you struggle with substance abuse or process addiction, this is for you. Sign up for free at mettagroup.org/addiction or head to the link below.